All right. Welcome to Customizing WebVIs. We're nearly through the whole conference. Thank you guys for joining us. It's in the afternoon, and it's been a really busy week. For some of us, it's been a really busy month, and folks in marketing, but it's been a really busy 3 months. So coming to a close here, but I'm really excited about this session and sharing with you guys some unique and cool things you can do with WebVIs to customize them for your own applications. My name is Mark Black. I'm a product owner in the application software department. Product owner is a new title for National Instruments, a new role. My primary job is managing our backlog of all of our work. And there's a lot of these product owner folks sort of running around NIWeek. Encourage you guys to get the opportunities to talk to them, to speak your mind, because we have a lot of influence over the direction of the product. A little bit in my background, I've spent about the last 10 years working on all sorts of different data communication and visualization technologies at National Instruments. Everything from shared variables and LabVIEW DSC and web services, things like data dashboard, worked on several releases of that. Spent several years with my colleague here, Minan, and a collection of other folks building WebVIs. And most recently, I've been working on our services product. You may have heard of it this week, called SystemLink. And specifically something called SystemLink Cloud, and we're going to be showing off a little bit of that in our presentation. All right, so okay, I encourage you guys to go to this bit.ly link on your phone. What we're going to be talking about is building up this very simple WebVI that I have here on the right. Just to talk about some of the things that we're going to be looking at here is we're going to be showing how you can use a control called the URL image control to dynamically change images and use those images to reflect status. In this case, it's angry dinosaur status. And also using emojis to be able to do status indication in grids. So it's very often we need to be able to show more levels of status than just a Boolean on and off. And I want to make the point that I think emojis are a really cool thing we can use to achieve that. All right, so we're going to be going through these things. So first off, this is available on GitHub, this example. We'll probably go in and eventually flesh out our README so it's a little more clear how to get started. But in case you wanted to access the code that we're going to be touching today, you certainly have it available to you online. So yeah, we're going to be showing off what WebVIs look like in LabVIEW NXG and doing a little bit of a tour of LabVIEW NXG. We're going to be talking about how you can make your WebVI fit well on phones and customize it with images and emojis, as I said previously. And we're going to talk about applying your own styling rules to style your WebVI in ways that we haven't necessarily exposed in the product in a first-class way. We're going to talk a bit about calling JavaScript from the diagram, which is a future feature we're currently working on it, but we want to show off what you can do because it's just a really remarkable enhancement to WebVIs. And finally, we're going to talk about hosting data and apps using SystemLink Cloud. Here's this example, and if a few of you guys open it up on your phone, notice that WebVI is hosted, and there's actually real network data being communicated to that WebVI. There's a VI running at my desk back at the corporate office in North Austin, and that's what we're going to be interacting with here. All right, from here. Oh yeah, so just a little more background. We have these terms, WebVI. You also hear us say the term web application a lot. So on the left, we have our WebVI. It's source code, right? It's VIs in LabVIEW, but these are VIs for the web, so they're WebVIs. It's what we call it when the code is in LabVIEW, when we're editing it, when we're developing it. When we build a WebVI, do the build output, we call it a web application. And when we build a WebVI, it's analogous to building an EXE, right? We don't call it a VI when it's an executable, we call it an executable. In this case, we call it a web application. And really, the technologies we've used to build the WebVI more or less make it indistinguishable from any other web application. It's just a web application that's been created with LabVIEW rather than just writing it from hand. All right. And I'm going to be showing off some of these concepts as I get into the product, but I wanted to bring them up here at a pretty high level. So the first concept is the LabVIEW project. So if you've used LabVIEW before, you've been familiar with this concept. We have this concept, of course, in LabVIEW NXG as well. And it's sort of the highest level box that your application is going to fit within. The next thing is System Designer. System Designer is a really amazing tool for not only just documenting, but actually showing the live hardware and devices that are connected to your system. It also has this really important quality of determining the compile target for your application. So in our case, the compile target is going to be a web server because we're building a WebVI. So here we have the target web server. You can see we have the system diagram stack there. If we keep on going, within a target, we define components. Components in some ways are analogous to LVLibs in LabVIEW 2018, but we use them to bucket the collection of files that are going to make up our application, and also bucket the collection of files that make up reusable libraries that you might use. This is actually a really, really powerful concept. It takes a little bit of getting used to become familiar with it because it is a new concept. But I think it's actually a really, really important step forward in making LabVIEW a better tool for gelling with software engineering tools. So within an application component, it's a little bit hard to see. Your component, we have some VIs there. We also have some other files that we're going to be referencing in our application, some images. We'll be seeing more of that later. And then finally, I have a library where I have a bunch of reusable code that I use between different applications. And what's really cool about this, and something I want to point out, is that these reusable libraries don't need to be WebVIs. They can just be VIs. So if you have reusable libraries that the VIs in them are supported on both the web server target and say like the desktop target, you could reuse those between the two. And in fact, we have an example on GitHub that shows that. All right, so with that, we're going to talk about making a WebVI. So we're just going to close this.
It didn't duplicate.
Oh, it did not. There we go. We got to do that. Thank you a lot. All right, so here we have our NXG launcher window. When you first launch NXG, you might see something like this, a really cool car or an airplane, some really awesome graphics created by our visual design team. We want to launch a project. So NXG has a lot of really great starter projects to get you up and running, and we have one for web applications. And this is really nice because I talked about these different concepts of projects and system diagram and compile targets and components and all of these different things you need to keep in your head. Using that launcher button creates all of those for you. So just really quick, we can see in System Designer our web server. You can see that we have this component here. I can open that up. Inside it, I have my WebVI. My WebVI is already all marked for top level. Of course, we can drill into my WebVI. So how many of you guys have had the opportunity to use NXG on your own, or maybe did one of the hands-on sessions while you're here this week? All right, a pretty good number. So I'm going to move through this reasonably quickly. But if you're not familiar with the NXG environment, there's some important concepts. So in the middle here, we have our canvas area. For WebVIs, this is actually an embedded web browser. So it's actually a whole web page running here, and we're dropping real HTML widgets. So this live editing is sort of like we're live editing a web page. A lot of direct manipulation in LabVIEW, just like you're used to for moving and sizing things. Something that's new is this piece on the right. So it used to be hid between a lot of right-click menus and modal dialogues. Now it gets really nicely surfaced in this right configuration pane. This right configuration pane, of course, we can see my items, my selected gauge, I can set my fonts on it, other properties. And this is really the first class way of customizing controls. And gauges are actually really cool, probably worth showing. We have a few different ways you can look at them, lines or needles. We can even adjust the start and end angles in case you needed to have a radial indicator with like 360 degrees showing. We also have some properties on our panel, so our canvas area, and some properties on the document itself. Here we have this aspect switcher, so switching between our panel and our diagram. WebVIs are just VIs. It's the same G programming semantics that you know and love from LabVIEW. We have, of course, an icon view if we wanted to edit the connector pane for this. And unique to WebVIs, we also have this HTML view. And we're going to be seeing a lot of this today. This view is generated for you as you're interacting and dropping things on your front panel. But it also provides a way for us to escape out of the box that is LabVIEW and do some of the things that the web can do that maybe LabVIEW cannot do yet. All right. So that's just about everything I wanted to hit there. Yeah. Moving on. All right. So now let's talk about actually customizing this. And this is where the session is going to become interactive. So I'm going to be calling you guys to help out with this. Let's close this. All right. So one of the first things I did was make this panel phone size. So we saw that by default in this application, you can see my panel is it 1024. Now, I've been doing this long enough that I just memorized. My iPhone 7 is 350 pixels across, so I can come here and make this 350. Click on that, and you can see that now it's changed the shape and size of my canvas area. And now I can still move these things around kind of however I want, but it's important for them to fit within the canvas area so when I run, we're not clipping. So while you can see everything now, when we actually hit run, you can see how it's clipped. And it's because we want to make sure you're keeping things within the bounds of the mobile viewport. So I've gone and done that here. So some of you who may have opened it up on your phone may have noticed that it fit well. You don't have to like zoom or pan or anything around your phone. And something to keep in mind is this is pretty rudimentary as far as a way of sizing a WebVI for your phone. And we're actually really hard at work at doing a much more sophisticated option. Things that fall under the terminology responsive. You've seen these types of things with Bootstrap and a lot of modern websites. So that is going to be coming to WebVIs, and we'll be showing off more of that in the future. The next thing to show off is this image control. So this is one of our image controls here. I can actually move it around, and we can make it a little bit more clear that it is an image. And we can drop an image control from our palettes, and I could go and select an image to go in this, and I can see that I have some images here. And there's my angry dinosaur. Of course, we can also just drag our images from our file view and the property window. But we can also do things dynamically. And so if we look at this control on the block diagram, right here, you'll notice that it's modeled as a string indicator. And because it's a string indicator, what we're actually passing to it is a URL. It's actually a relative URL to our WebVI itself. So here I'm saying, hey, go and display the image happy dinosaur, and it'll show that. So when I initialize, I try to show the happy dinosaur. And then when I'm reading my network data, my network tags, I have some logic in my block diagram, albeit not very sophisticated logic in this block diagram, that decides between which image I want to show. And so this is really powerful, right? This is just flipping between two images in a select statement. but you could have an array of images and like a list box that's indexing through those images and show lots of different images if that's what your application needed. But let's talk about how we actually pull these images into the application itself. So, all right, I need 2 images. We're going to go to image search. This is where you guys help out. Actually, I was already on it. So someone throw out like a concept that is going to be our good status. We're going to look for an image here. Anybody? Things are going good.
Thumbs up.
Thumbs up. All right. All right. Found some images. Anyone that we like in particular?
Fallout Boy.
Fallout Boy. I like Fallout Boy too. All right, here we go. So let's do save image as, and we'll just leave that as the name, and we'll put it on my desktop so I can find it easily. We're going to do that. So what's something for a bad status? Can't be thumbs down. It's too easy.
Emoji.
The poop emoji? But we're going to get to emojis in a minute, so I'm going to have more of that.
Since we've got Fallout Boy, maybe if we can find nuclear mushroom cloud.
All right, mushroom cloud. All right. That's terrifying. But we're going to use it. It's kind of big. Let's find one that's a little bit smaller. All right, how about, we'll use that one. All right. All right, it's some funky name. Let's give this a little bit easier of a name. Okay. So jumping back to LabVIEW. So we need to be able to tell my WebVI what images it's going to bundle with its application. Because otherwise we won't be able to do this dynamic switching. And actually we need to bundle our image with the whole web application and they all go together. Because if you think about it, in any website, all the images that are on the website are right next to all the other sources like HTML and JavaScript and CSS and so forth. So we got to do the same thing in LabVIEW. So I can come in here and I can say import files, go to my desktop. Let's see, we got boom, and what happened to Fallout Boy? There he is. We got those 2 images, and I say open, and we get this warning that says the selected files would be copied into the application directory. So this means actually it gets copied into the folder that NXG manages that contain all the files within your component. So this is actually really nice, and we can see that these images show up here. When I click on these images, I can see their relative URL is shown to me on the right, and I'm going to want to pay attention to that. It's going to be like the meaning of Fallout Boy, and Boom, and all of these other ones. So again, coming back to my WebVI, I could definitely just drag this guy on, but I want to do something dynamic with it. So on my diagram, I'm just going to go in and change this. Let's see, let's make this guy. It's a really long name. Actually, I think I have a shorter one. It's the same image, come to think of it. I just lucked out there that you guys and I have the same idea. There's thumbs up, and we'll go into the part where we're making some decisions. Let's see, we have boom. And let's see, thumbs up. All right, awesome.
Do you want that? PNG is.
Oh, yeah. Dude, I need you guys all the time to share a program with me. That's .png, right? And that's .jpeg? Great. So now if we go in our front panel and we run this, let's see, this comes up. There's our Fallout Boy. And so we're currently in the fault state. So we're showing this, and I have a little button here to clear the fault. And we can show the other guy. So that's really cool. We've really easily just gone and found some images. We brought them into our WebVI, and we've shown how we can use the unique properties of our URL image control to do dynamic images. So this is really great. Maybe you're storing images as part of your tests, and you need to go and review those images. something you could definitely do with this technique and similar techniques. All right. Any questions about that before I move on?
I assume you can just use web addresses, URLs,
Mm-hmm.
directly if you're connected.
Yeah, that's right. It's a really good point. So just to repeat the question, can you point these images at just other URLs that are maybe somewhere else hosted on the internet? And you absolutely can. So if I knew of, say, an image that was hosted on Giphy or something like that, and I wanted to use it, I could put the full web address and it would show up.
You didn't change the height of the canvas, I think you called it.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a reason why, or does it not
Oh, you know, it doesn't really matter. I think when I was first putting this demo together and I was like doing some debugging, I had an error out here, and so I left it a little long. I think it's not uncommon to have mobile applications, especially web applications, where there's some vertical scrolling. So, you know, I just left that extra space. Perhaps it was more sophisticated, maybe a more real application. I would have consumed a bit more space. But yeah, you can shrink that up too. I think it's like 800. Let's see that. We're a lot shorter now. All right. So if we look at our application, we have a data grid here. Should probably mention that. It's a new control in LabVIEW NXG. So our desktop VIs and WebVIs have them. Data grids are modeled as an array of clusters. And this is really great because we can show multiple different data types here. But I'm showing, again, some really simple things. I have this trend indicator and then this status indicator. You notice these are empty squares. And it's because it's a bit of an older embedded web browser here, and it doesn't render all of the emojis. We're actually have swapped and upgraded this web browser to a much more modern one, and I'll be making itself available in the version of NXG that releases this fall. So let's see what we did here. Go on the diagram. So I actually have a sub-VI called Format Grid. Just sort of show you what this looks like. So I read my tags, read my network tags, then I pass an array of data into this format grid, and it produces my data grid. So within this sub-VI here, and I'm not really doing anything very sophisticated in terms of the logic. It's more to prove that you bring your own logic, but you can use these techniques. So here on my block diagram, in fact, let's zoom in a bit, because we can do that. Yeah, zoom. These are just string controls. And I've literally just pasted some emojis into them in order to get this to work. So again, here, this is really simple. It's just dual state. It's on or off, up or down, good or bad. But we hear about a lot of needs for tri-state indicators or end-state indicators. I think we may eventually have a control that does exactly that. But with this trick, you can do some of these things now. So let's do it now. We're going to go to the Emojipedia, I think it's called. And we're going to search for some emojis. All right, people, you're on. Give me an emoji that means trending up. Up. All right, we have lots of arrows. This is actually really nice. Let's do the fast up button. I haven't heard of that one before. Really nice. There's a button to copy. Jump back into LabVIEW. Paste. Whoa, right? Like, oh my God, we just copied and pasted a string. Woo! All right, let's go something that means trending down. Ooh, upside down face. I like that. Oh, what the hell? Let's do upside down face. Copied. And paste it. Oh, you actually see that. Oh, I think I have two things in there. Ooh, upside down face doesn't render in WPF, so be aware of that. WPF is what our UI technology that our block diagram is rendered in. And most emojis I've used so far and have tested did work. But that's one that isn't rendering correctly. All right, I have a warning here and an OK hand here. You guys have any other ideas of great emojis you want to see in this? All right, we'll just leave it as is. I think I kind of proved my point, right? So we come back to our front panel. And we run this guy. You actually see that we can't really see any of the boxes here in LabVIEW. So it's going to be really important to actually test this in a real web browser. Not to steal your thunder too much, but I'm going to quickly show that off. So in System Designer, we have the capability of doing this thing called right-click and run. Oh, and it failed because I'm running. And it builds my application, and it automatically opens it up and hosts it in my default web server, which on this awesome machine is Internet Explorer, boot earns. Let's get it to something a bit more modern. And we see our OK status and some of these other things, and our new emojis. Although that doesn't look quite right.
Did you build it? No.
I did build it. I need to save it. I won't fiddle around here for too long because we'll just be wasting time. Actually, I bet. Refresh. All right. We get the basic idea here. Images can convey status, so can emojis if we wanted to be able to do that. And we can use strings to a lot of great effect here. I just wanted to go and check, make sure I got everything in here. I did. And with that, we're going to change gears and talk about CSS.
Can you hear me? I don't think you can hear me through the mic though, but that's fine. Can you hear me in the back? Awesome. All right. So we're going to go one layer deeper, and we're going to start talking about customizing WebVIs. So up to now, we've been talking about using features that are built into the editor for customizing WebVIs. But like Mark showed, we have that source panel. We can get deep into the panel itself and start manipulating things in there. There's inherent risk to that. We'll talk about it. But to get started, let's dive in and talk about CSS. So CSS, cascading style sheets, is used to style, to describe the presentation of HTML. So there's a little description from Wikipedia over there. The main goal is that we want to take HTML elements, so when we're looking at that source panel, all the HTML tags in there. So we want to use CSS to find those HTML tags. You do that with the CSS Selector. So the CSS Selector is used to find HTML tags, and then you have different CSS declarations that specify different properties on those HTML tags. So those two parts together make up one piece of CSS that's going to style on the page. So this is an example, kind of a high-level overview of a couple of different CSS selectors. There's actually a huge range of them, and how they map to HTML. So fundamentally, when you're looking at a piece of HTML, when you're looking at an element, it has an element name. So you might have seen the div tag on an HTML web page if you've looked at the source, or the input tag. So that's the element name. Then there's attribute value pairs. So fundamentally, an element itself, one HTML element, only has the element name, different attribute value pairs, and some internal text inside as well. So in HTML, there's a couple of attribute names that are unique and have additional capabilities. Specific for styling-related behaviors, two important ones are ID. So IDs are unique across a whole page, or at least that's the goal. If you accidentally give multiple things the same ID, your CSS might not target what you expect. That's unfortunate. But they should be unique across the page. So if you go into the source panel inside of LabVIEW, you can add IDs to elements to make them easier to target with CSS. But you have to make sure to make those names unique. So that's one special attribute that's on an HTML element. And you can see the selector, in order to target it, you can see the hashtag main, the # main over there. So that # when you're writing your CSS selector means, hey, look up this thing with this ID. In this case, it's looking up for something called main, so it's going to target that first element, which has an ID main. So that little hash selector is specific for the ID attribute. There's another attribute, class, which can actually have multiple values inside of it. So here in this example, in the top example, we see class equals foo space bar. That means if you write a selector that targets a class with foo or a class with bar, both of those will match against that element. So again, we're diving in deep. We're talking about selectors, ways to pick things out of the HTML and then apply different properties onto them. So we have two examples that are using the class selector. So one is the dot bar, and then it applies some properties. So here, we see that first element, it has two classes in it, foo and bar. The second one just has one class, bar. But that selector, let's say it made the color red, is going to apply to both of these elements because they both have bar. So selectors select the maximum number of possible elements for that selector in a page. So by default, they select extra things. And your goal is to make your selector as specific as possible to target what you need. And finally, and then a second example, we're making a more specific selector. So here we say only style P elements that have the class bar. And again, the class syntax is when you have that dot in the front followed by the class name. So in that case, if that makes the color blue for your font text, it would only select the second element because that's the only one with the element P and the class bar at the same time. So a lot of stuff really fast, but the main idea, you need to create a selector in order to apply different properties to HTML elements in a page. Right. So we're going to go through and see what it looks like to do that inside of LabVIEW. And we're going to do that with 3 different steps. So first, like Mark showed, we're going to see how to run a WebVI in a web browser, because web browsers, pretty much all of them, ship with good developer tooling to help you inspect the CSS of a page. We'll look at how, specifically in the Chrome DevTools, how to navigate around to find an element, and use the browser environment to help us write the selector for that element, and then how to add that element, that new CSS we've made, into LabVIEW itself. All right, so if we start at our example, one thing we might look at inside of here is we'll see, it would actually be great if these elements were centered inside of their boxes. So the first thing we want to do before we dive in and start customizing CSS is we want to see if LabVIEW gives us a way to do this natively on its own. The big reason for that is these CSS selectors can change over time. We change the elements we use under the hood, we change the structure of the page. So if you're writing CSS, custom CSS, you have to be aware that it can change and it could break between LabVIEW versions. We don't guarantee that the CSS, any CSS you write today is going to work in the next version of LabVIEW. So first and foremost, before you take the risk of making your own CSS, you want to make sure and use features built into LabVIEW if it already gives you the capability that you're looking for. In this case, we'll take the data grid, we'll select that first column, and we'll see we do have some styling capabilities for these string columns inside of a data grid, but we don't have the ability to text-align center, to center those. So what if we wanted to do that ourselves? The first thing we might try and do is look at the HTML panel. And what we'll find is that if we find the data grid element, it's actually not super descriptive. It's not showing us all the elements that appear in the page. So the source panel is good for a high-level description, but it's not going to be good for determining the internal state and trying to figure out the internals of what are happening in an element. So to do that, instead, we're going to go to System Designer, run the VI, and open it inside of a web browser that I like more. All right, cool, and we have it, all right. So, all right, there they are. I think we weren't getting data before, so they didn't update it.
Network is so
Conferences. All right. So what we want to do is, in these text boxes, we would like to center these to keep them centered inside of them. So I could right-click on them, choose Inspect, and this is using Chrome and Chrome DevTools, but Chrome, Firefox, Safari, Edge, they all provide similar types of DevTooling features. So I'll inspect the element, and it jumps very deep right to the element. So I could see, if I look at this HTML view, you can see all the elements that are dynamically created as the page is running. So there's a lot more than what's shown inside the source panel. So here I see that text area. All right, so now how do I make a new style that targets all of these text areas? So what I could do inside of here, I could say new style rule. It'll try and choose one by default. This one actually looks pretty good. It selects all these text areas in the data grid. All right. But me as a CSS designer am aware that if I look at this, this is selecting every text area in the page that has a class on it called NIText field. So that's a lot. There could be things outside of the data grid that are text areas. There could be other inputs around the page in the future. So that's too broad a selector. It's selecting too many things. So what I could do, scroll up inside of here. If I wanted to be super specific and only center columns for this specific data grid, what I could do is scroll up, figure out what contains it, and I see it's inside a data grid at some point. There we go. Nope, here. And I see this data grid has a specific NI control ID. So I could target against both of those, and that will target this exact data grid. I'm going to be a little more flexible and say I want to center the text area of every data grid that gets dropped into the page. So I'll say NI data grid as the first part, so that's an element selector selecting all NI data grids. And then if I put a space and continue with a different piece of selector, that's going to be child elements of that data grid. So this is going to be all text areas that are a child of the NI data grid, which might still be too broad. So let's make it all child string controls is probably what I want. There we go. So NI string controls. And then those child text areas. So with those, if I do that, I can see I'm still selecting everything in this data grid, and I've made it more specific. I'm not going to accidentally target other things as my VI grows over time. And now I could start adding different style properties. So I could say text align and center. Cool. So now I've customized the CSS. I could go do this, find different things that are stylable, keeping in mind that if I want to style something, maybe the text color, and that's already stylable in the editor, maybe I'd go back to the editor instead and apply styling that way instead of trying to make custom CSS for it. When I'm done and I have all the styles I want to add to the editor, because this is just inside the running page, as soon as this page is closed, all these styles are gone. I can click this Inspector Style Sheet button, so it gives us all the styles that we were dynamically adding with that plus button. I can copy them all, and then go back to LabVIEW, and inside of the HTML panel for my VI, append at the bottom, at the right above the head, at the of the closing of the head. So make it the last element inside the head. Add a new style tag. Oops. Spelled correctly. And get rid of this. And then I can paste my CSS. And if I click Apply Changes, it'll actually format it for me. All right. So now this is part of my VI itself. So after I clicked Apply Changes, go back to the panel, I can see all my elements are set. And let's see, because that's what you do. Okay. So, key takeaways when you're trying to make your own CSS. Always make sure the editor can do it first. Check if the editor supports that style first. Remember that these selectors can change between releases. We do change the elements out under the hood. The structure of the page can change. We're trying to add more and more features directly inside the editor to let you style from directly inside the editor. So you have to be aware that style sheets you write, when you migrate to newer versions of NXG, you might have to come back and revisit those styles to make sure they're behaving as you expect. And use the browser developer tools to help you discover selectors. The source panel is not going to give you enough information on its own. Cool. All right, so the next thing I want to talk about, this is a further future feature, calling JavaScript from the diagram. Why would you want to do it, and some examples. So I could jump back in presentation mode. All right, so JavaScript, why is it useful? First off, it's the language of the browser. And what that means is everything that the browser exposes, you interface to with JavaScript. So being able to call JavaScript from your block diagram gives you access to a lot of capabilities. If you haven't done too much with browsers or haven't seen a lot of the modern features in browsers, one thing to be aware of is that the modern browsers, the ones that WebVIs target nowadays, have a lot of features added to them. They've essentially become little operating systems in and of themselves. They could do lots and lots of different things. So this slide is kind of overwhelming, and it's that's kind of the point of it, to show you the capabilities that are available in the browser, available through JavaScript. And if your WebVIs can invoke JavaScript, that means they're available to your WebVIs. So things like high-performance networking, low-level networking operations where you can get data like TCP-like streams or UDP-like streams. We could have lossy data transmission with WebRTC. Local storage, so you could actually store things offline on a user's machine. You can make your WebVI available offline and access data even if they're not connected online. You could access files from the disk. You have hardware communication. A lot of those are not available across all the browsers yet. These are newer standards. Excuse me. But like Web Bluetooth, Web USB, the ability for a web page to talk directly to a piece of USB hardware that the device is connected to, or to talk over Bluetooth to a device, that's coming soon. It's in a lot of browsers that Chrome supports already, but it's not across all the browsers yet. Low-level media APIs, so you can do very fast-performing, low-level drawing operations for 3D, 2D graphics. And then higher-level APIs built on top of those. So there's tons of libraries available in the browser environment too. So these are some popular ones, but breaking it up into different categories for visualization, making visualizations you haven't seen in LabVIEW before, UI components like maps and MathJax let you have good math drawing primitives to put equations on your diagrams, 3D graphics, services, so talking to AWS or Firebase, different third-party services. Many of them provide JavaScript APIs to communicate with, so you could use those. So the idea, there's lots of features available, exposed by the browser, lots of libraries, a lot of things you could leverage in your application. So this shows two demos I threw together for the presentation. So one on the left is we're actually using the Web Audio API. So the Web Audio API lets you capture data from the microphone, and it even has FFT processing primitives. The browser has an FFT library built into it, and you can call into that directly. So there, it's sampling some audio and showing it FFT, and I'm trying to whistle to get the FFT to go up and down on the frequency. And then the second one, which is way cooler, is an augmented reality demo. So it's using a library called A-Frame. You have 10 lines of HTML that describe the scene of your page, and then you're able to visualize things on top of different markers. And what I can do is from the WebVI, send properties into the page to move the little eagle up and down on that marker. And the cool part about this, the thing I want to emphasize the most, is that it's not a crazy amount of code. The browser APIs tend to be very high level. They're consistent across the web browsers. So this is the API. A lot of it is actually about trying to synchronize the waveform and the FFT in some way. But the key parts are analyzer.get float time domain data, analyzer.get frequency data. And that's the key part of what's going on there in order to take the data and do analysis on it. And then I can pass that back into LabVIEW to draw into a graph or to do other processing. So that's all the JS that was written for this one. This one could actually be trimmed down a lot. And then this is all the JS and HTML to make this augmented reality demo. There's like 15 lines of HTML. Most of it is just to go into the page, find the eagle, and set its height value. And then the top part is 10 lines of HTML that declaratively lay out the scene. They say, hey, there's an eagle element at this position. There's a marker element, put the eagle on top of it. So 10 lines of HTML, 10 lines of JS. And then you get this very rich interactivity inside your application. And you could actually go and try it out if you have a partner next to you, and if you both have Android, because I didn't have an iOS device, and I tried it this morning and it doesn't work on iOS. But if you have a partner next to you with Android, one of you can do the marker, one can do the display, and you can try it out yourself. All right. More key takeaways. So there's lots of cross-browser JS APIs and libraries. They tend to be high level and readily consumable. JS APIs are higher level APIs generally. They're pretty easy to interface with. Or at least it's clear, they're well documented, and lots of people have done it before you. So being able to consume that on a WebVI block diagram opens up a lot of capabilities that are expressible inside of a web browser. Invoking JavaScript from the block diagram, it's a future feature, it's coming soon. There's actually inside of the tech preview, you could try it today. It's not the final version of what that feature looks like, but it's getting pretty close. And I think there's a new beta coming out soon for the tech preview, which will have a couple more features that are important in it. But yeah, customizing your WebVI, adding new UI components, new types of visualization that you haven't been able to do before.
So we've learned a lot about tools that are available to us, built into LabVIEW NXG and the WebVI, creative ways of using off-the-shelf technologies like emojis and images, and then leveraging the amazing developer tools that just ship with the browser in order to be able to snoop around and change things. But with all these like really, really great technology available to us in WebVIs, we can find ourselves with this fundamental problem of where do I put this thing so I can get to it? And answering that question and making that simpler was a key care about for us, because we want you guys focusing on building really amazing test and monitoring systems, not becoming IT administrators. And what we've done is built a product, it's in tech preview right now, called System Link Cloud. And we're going to talk a bit about that. So System Link Cloud, at least while it's in tech preview, if you're part of the NI Software Technology Preview, you have access to this today. If you're not part of the NI Software Technology Preview, you can go to ni.com/techpreview and apply. And we have a lot of getting started information to get you set up and ready to go. But there's sort of three pillars to this product right now. And this is a lot less than what we see in System Link. You guys may have heard of a lot of this week. So this is a really, really small subset of the features that full System Link has. The first is WebVI hosting. So we wanted to make sure that you could host your WebVIs and do it securely. WebVIs, of course, are a really, really amazing piece of technology, and we've been exploring that today. The data services that we're using to communicate through this app that we've been building up are also hosted in the cloud as well. And this is really important. Like, I didn't have to sweat, like, on this sketchy conference Wi-Fi, will I actually be able to route back to my desk in my office? In my office, it's behind, the office firewall. By using the cloud, I can work around all of that. And we have two types of APIs available to us today. One is tags, which is for publishing measurement data, so thermocouples, set points, things of that like. And also messages, which is a publish subscribe API, which we can use to send commands and configuration data to lots of different devices all at once. And finally, something that we're working on, it's not fully exposed in System Link Cloud yet, but it probably will be within the week, a week or two, is Dashboard Builder. We think doing remote monitoring of live data is a really, really, really common application. And you can use WebVIs to build this up, But this is a bit of a higher level starting point for building these things up as well, because WebVIs are going to continue to get very, very sophisticated in terms of their capability. And we expect people to build sophisticated custom client applications with WebVIs, and for simple monitoring, maybe they're just using Dashboard Builder. And let's not take the survey, and let's actually show a demo of what it looks like to build this out. Let's see here. So a little bit about the data communication piece. So within my diagram here, I have this initialized case. And here I'm defining all of the tags that I want to use. They have this naming convention that isn't enforced. It's more of a guideline, but using this guideline allows you to do very powerful things with like querying. In this case, the server that I'm talking to is System Link Cloud, and I provided an API key that I generate from System Link Cloud. If we look at this sub-VI here, this is actually making the calls to our service. So I just bundled that all up in a sub-VI so I could reuse it across a lot of different applications. Well, let's jump back out here. And to be able to host my WebVI on System Link Cloud, I first need to turn it into a package. So NIPKG is maybe something you've heard about this week as well. It's our package format that all of our drivers and application software, and we hope that your reuse libraries and your applications will also be packaged this way as this technology becomes more widespread. So you can create it by right-clicking on my application component and say Create Distribution. I already have one here. So distributions are analogous to creating an installer. And so here I have my application. If I was going to install this package on a particular machine, I might give it an address that's like, hey, system, and then a relative location, perhaps to a web server I've installed, and I can move this package to like another Windows PC and install it. We don't have to worry about that here. You'll be required to fill out things like the name and the company, some of this boilerplate stuff down here. But you want to make sure your build target is a web server, because we're building a WebVI. And you're going to want to make sure your output type is a package. I believe it defaults to package installer, but we want it to be a package. So we put all of those things together, and we hit our build button here. You can see it's building my web application. And when it's done building the web application, it turns around and builds the package. So I can see my package here. So let's host this thing. So we go to systemlinkcloud.com. Give this guy a minute on our incredible conference Wi-Fi. And there's all the different features are exposed through here. We're going to do web app hosting, so I'm going to show today. If you want to see more, come by and we can chat more. So we say go to web apps. And I'm asked to log in with my NI.com account. So this is my real deal NI.com account, like you may have. No smoke and mirrors here. And if I can type my password on this keyboard. Never. All right, so you can see a bunch of web applications I've previously uploaded. In fact, that one you guys were looking at earlier was one of those. I say choose NIPKG, and I just put the path in my clipboard. You can see this is what I want to upload, customizing WebVIs. Hit open, and it uploads. It'll take us a little bit of time. We've got a few images in here, and conference Wi-Fi is really slow. Upload succeeded. That's great. And we can see my customizing WebVI is actually on the next page. So here it is. Of course, I can make this public or private. If I make it public, anyone who has the URL can view it. When it's private, only I can view it, and I have to enter my NI.com credentials to view it. But let's make it public. And we're working to make these sharing options a lot more sophisticated. While we're in tech preview, we kept it very simple. but we're going to do a lot in this area in the future. So now if I click on my web application, it opens up in a new tab. You can see that I'm hosting on systemlinkcloud.io. And here's our application up and running, showing the boom. I have a button for clearing faults. When I click clear fault, I'm actually sending a message to the application running at my desk back in my office. And it's changing a state in a state machine. So it's a really powerful concept that we try to demonstrate in a really simple way. So that's our presentation.
Is that ricocheting off of the system link, or is it going directly to, going through some?
It's actually being hosted on our web server that we maintain in the cloud for you. It's really nice, right? Like if you had to figure out how do I set up a web server, how do I set up all the permissions and stuff on it, how do I get that web server to be available to the whole world, how do I limit different people, we're taking care of all of that for you.
But when you did the clear fault, that message.
Yeah, what it does is I'm sending through. It looks like just an API call, but effectively what it does is it goes up to System Link Cloud. It goes and then it sends each iteration of my loop where I'm producing this data. It checks to see if there's new messages, and if there are new messages, it dequeues it and then evaluates the state in my state machine. I can show you that VI, but it's ugly, and I need to like clean it up a bit before I wanted to show it to a big group, because you people would be like, wow, that's really bad LabVIEW code. Yeah, it just needs to be cleaned up a bit.
For the Skyline API, in order to publish the data, the Skyline API, as I understand, is available for LabVIEW 2014 and later.
That's right.
Where do we find the Skyline data to install it into our copies? Is it up on Package Manager, or?
If you install the System Link client, you'll get all of the VIs you need for all the versions of like LabVIEW 2015 through 2018. Also, if you install the web module and you already have LabVIEW installed, so you install the NXG web module, it will also install these. So it's kind of cool. The web module, you know, we mostly think of it as an NXG thing, but it actually does install components into like LabVIEW 2015 through LabVIEW 2018, so that we can take advantage of these new things like WebVIs in a much simpler way, without requiring you to have to port your whole application. So you can go in and modify existing applications. Yes.
I assume that this isn't something that NI is going to just let us use out of the goodness of its heart. So I'm just curious what the model for Pane is going to be. Is it like one size fits all, subscription based on size? Do you have any idea?
So I think we have a lot of ideas, and what we're realizing is that there's a lot of work we have to do to try to determine the best model for purchasing this on its own. But it's not going to be the only way you can get it. We're also making System Link Cloud available as an entitlement to people who've purchased the NXG web module, because we think it's really important. It makes your WebVI so much more valuable to have this technology. And also if you purchased a copy of System Link, our on-premises server solution, you'll also be entitled to this, as long as you're active on SSP. And of course, yes, we're looking at different models of how we would price this in the future. And there's a lot of different models out there for services on the internet. We're looking at those. There are a lot of different ways that we think this application or this service will become more capable. And those future capabilities are also going to influence our decision making on how we price this. So it's a big open question. If you feel really strongly about it, I have Rita here. Rita has this big gnarly project in front of her to figure out how we're going to do this. So it's going to be a big thing we're working on this summer.
And I'd just like to point out Alliance, because I asked about this, it's also included in the Alliance package.
Yeah, so just to repeat, that is included in the Alliance bundle. So for those of you who are Alliance members, you get access to this service as well. All right, guys. Any other questions? Anything? All right, let's be done. Thank you.